Let's go to another video, but first subscribe and leave a like to strengthen the channel. Now, let's go.
The scratch on the wood was too weak to be human and too strong to be ignored. It was almost 2 in the morning when Elzbieta got out of bed, her bare feet touching the frozen floorboards of the cabin. Outside, the temperature had dropped to something that made the thermometer look like a cruel joke. She had lived alone for 11 years in that forgotten piece of the world, on the edge of a forest that winter turned into a white cemetery. Visits were not common. Visits at 2 in the morning were impossible. The scratching came again. Elzbieta grabbed the thick wool coat from the hook near the door and approached slowly. Through the crack of the ice-covered window, she tried to see something beyond the nothingness. The porch lamp swayed with the wind, and for a second she saw the silhouette. Large, low, staggering. Her heart raced, but not from fear, from recognition. There was something in that irregular movement, in that shape that could barely hold itself up in the snow, that spoke a familiar language, the language of someone at the limit. A language Elzbieta had understood since that night years earlier, when she had knocked on a stranger's door asking for help. She opened the door. The she-wolf was at the edge of the steps with her snout pressed against the wood, as if she didn't have the strength to insist. The dark fur was soaked and stiff with ice, when the front paws bent in a way that was not natural. The eyes, Elzbieta would never forget those eyes, had no anger. They had no threat. They had desperation. The animal whimpered once, low, almost human, and then she looked to the side. Elzbieta followed the wolf's gaze to a dark mass half buried in the snow, a few meters from the steps. Too small to be an adult, too still to be okay. Her chest tightened in a way she hadn't felt in a long time, since she buried her daughter 20 years earlier, also in a merciless winter. The pup didn't move. She didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk, didn't consider the absurdity of that moment, didn't remember that she was barefoot or that she was 73 years old with bones the cold no longer forgave. She simply went down the steps. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you thought and from which city or country you're watching. The pup was stiff. It was not an exaggeration. It was the raw truth that Elzbieta felt the moment she bent her knees into the snow and ran her hands over the small body. The temperature of her own skin had already dropped in the seconds since she had left the cabin, and even so the pup's fur was colder than the air around it. A cold that was not only winter. It was the cold of something that was about to become the past. The she-wolf did not move away. She stayed still less than a meter away, her snout low, her eyes fixed on Elzbieta with an attention that challenged any instinct to flee. Wounded animals attack. Frightened animals bite. But that was not the behavior of a cornered beast. It was the behavior of someone who had exhausted every other option and had only trust left. Elzbieta lifted the pup with both arms. It weighed less than she expected, and that frightened her more than anything else. She climbed the steps without running, because running with that fragile weight would be a mistake she could not afford to make. The she-wolf followed her to the base of the steps and stopped there, as if she knew there was a boundary she was not meant to cross. She stayed watching while the door closed. Inside the cabin, Elzbieta went straight to the fire that still bit in the fireplace. She knelt on the wooden floor and placed the pup as close to the flames as possible without touching them. With her palm pressed over the tiny chest, she waited. Nothing. Then something. A minimal tremor, almost imperceptible, like the beginning of a dream. Elzbieta closed her eyes for a moment, not in relief, but in concentration. She had been a midwife for almost 30 years before retiring to that forest. She knew the difference between the tremor of someone arriving and the spasm of someone leaving. This one was arrival. She went to the medicine cabinet she kept out of old habit and returned with a flannel cloth, which she slowly wrapped around the pup's body. With a syringe she used for animals that occasionally appeared injured at her door, she dripped warm water onto the parted lips. Outside, the she-wolf had not moved. She was lying in the snow, her head raised toward the lit window, waiting. The night passed slowly, the way difficult nights usually do. Elzbieta did not sleep. She stayed seated on the floor beside the fireplace, with the pup wrapped in a flannel cloth on her lap, monitoring each breath as if she might lose it if she looked away for a second. At 3 in the morning, the trembling had intensified, a good sign because it meant the body was still fighting. At 4, the spasms eased and gave way to something more regular. At 5, for the first time since the little one had entered that cabin, the chest rose and fell with its own rhythm, steady, stubborn. She needed to take care of the she-wolf. The idea arrived without drama, like a conclusion that had been waiting for the right moment to impose itself. The pup was stable, but the mother outside was not. Elzbieta had seen the way that paw bent. She had seen how much strength the she-wolf no longer had. An animal in that state, alone in the cold, with a wound probably infected since before that night, would not survive until dawn without intervention. Elzbieta placed the pup inside a basket lined with the same flannel cloth and positioned it close enough to the fireplace to keep warm, far enough not to overheat. Then she went to the window. The she-wolf was still there, lying on her side now, which was different from before. It was not rest, it was collapse. Her breathing lifted small clouds of vapor that disappeared too quickly in the freezing air. There was a dark trail in the snow beneath the injured paw. Elzbieta recognized the color even through the fog glass. She went to the cabinet where she kept the supplies she had accumulated over the years caring for the forest animals.
Our community grows with every comment, so don't forget to leave yours and subscribe. I love to see how far our videos reach, so tell us in the comments. What state or country are you from?
She had what she needed. She was not a veterinarian, but she had learned out of necessity what no school would have taught: how to clean a deep cut without worsening the tissue, how to immobilize a limb without cutting off circulation, how to recognize when an animal still wants to live. The she-wolf did. Of that she was certain. She grabbed the flashlight, the bag of bandages, and the liquid antibiotic she kept for emergencies and walked down the steps for the second time that night. The she-wolf lifted her head when she heard the door. She did not growl. She did not retreat. She simply waited, with those eyes that were no longer asking, because the request had been made, it had been heard, and now only the answer remained. Working with an injured wild animal is not like working with a domesticated dog. There is no accumulated trust, no history of affection, no guarantee that instinct will not override everything else in a moment of pain. Elzbieta knew that, and even so she knelt in the snow beside the she-wolf with the same calm she would use to sit beside a patient in labor. She began slowly. First, just her presence. She stayed still at a respectful distance, letting the animal get used to her scent and the sound of her breathing. The she-wolf watched with half-closed eyes, her snout pulsing lightly. There was no aggression in that gaze. There was pain, and there was something Elzbieta could only describe as resignation. When she finally touched the injured paw, the she-wolf did not move. The cut was deep, probably from a trap, judging by the irregular shape of the wound. It had become infected, as she suspected, and the tissue around it was hot and swollen. Elzbieta worked slowly, cleaning carefully, applying the antibiotic without hurry, each movement telegraphed before it was made. At no moment did the she-wolf growl. At no moment did she pull away. When she tied the improvised bandage around the paw, she felt the animal's head rest with weight on her thigh. She stopped. She looked down. The she-wolf had her eyes closed. She was breathing deeply, with that slow cadence of someone who finally could release something she had been carrying for far too long. Elzbieta stayed there for a long moment, her hand resting lightly on the animal's neck, feeling the warmth that was beginning to slowly return beneath the soaked fur. The cold bit into her knees through her pants, but she did not move. Then, from inside the cabin, came a sound. Small, sharp, unmistakable. The pup had woken up. The she-wolf lifted her head immediately, ears pointed toward the cabin, her whole body tense with an attention that was not fear. It was recognition. It was the same instinct that had brought her to that door in the middle of the night. The same one that had kept her eyes fixed on that lit window for hours. Elzbieta stood up slowly, her knees protesting, and looked at the animal beside her. "He's awake," she said in a low voice, as if the she-wolf could understand. From the way the animal rose, perhaps she could. Elzbieta opened the cabin door and let the she-wolf enter. It was not a reflected decision. It was a simple gesture like so many others that night. Open, let pass, trust. The she-wolf crossed the threshold carefully, the bandaged paw touching the wooden floor with an almost conscious delicacy, as if she knew she was in a place that deserved respect. The pup was in a basket near the fireplace. When he caught the scent of his mother, the little body moved all at once, paws, snout, tail, in a disordered and glorious agitation that made Elzbieta laugh for the first time in many hours. The she-wolf approached the basket slowly, sniffed the pup for long seconds, then passed her tongue over his head with a firmness that seemed to say, I know you were here. I came to get you." Elzbieta stepped back to the chair beside the fireplace and stayed watching. There was a lifetime of losses inside that woman. There was the husband the winter had taken too soon, the daughter the illness had not spared, the years of silence she had mistaken for peace. But on that morning that was beginning to brighten through the cracks of the window, while a she-wolf slobbered over a pup that should not have survived, Elzbieta felt something she did not quite know how to name. It was not exactly joy. It was something older, quieter. The feeling of having done exactly what needed to be done in the only moment when it was still possible. When the sun finally appeared, weak and oblique as February suns usually are, the she-wolf stood up. The pup was standing too now, unsteady but firm, his eyes wide open to the world for the first time. The she-wolf looked at Elzbieta before leaving. It was a brief look, direct, without drama. Elzbieta nodded her head, as if she understood, and she did. The two went out through the open door and disappeared into the line of trees, two dark silhouettes against the white snow, until the forest swallowed them back. Elzbieta stayed on the porch for a while, the wool coat over her shoulders, watching the place where they had vanished. The cold still bit, but it seemed different now. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you thought, and from which city or country you were watching.